once mighty Bella now lay motionless, her 55-year-old frame reduced to skin and bone against the straw bedding of Whispering Pines Ranch. For 9 long days, she hadn't touched a single bite of food. The fire that had once made her a legend flickered faintly with each labored breath, as veterinarians tried everything they could and still came up short. For Ruth Johnson, now 78, this wasn't just the loss of a horse. It was the fading heartbeat of her most cherished memories. Outside, the bitter winds of a Montana December howled, snow piling against the barn like a slow funeral. Hope, like the light in Bella's eyes, was nearly gone. And then, the impossible happened. A voice long silent on this ranch for nearly 20 years crossed the threshold. Bella's ears twitched. The frail Mustang stirred. Something inside her, some memory sparked. It was Scott Johnson, a man who swore never to return to Whispering Pines. The silence between mother and son had lasted nearly 2 decades, the pain between them carved deep and raw. But now, standing before the horse he once helped rescue as a boy, his soft whisper carried through the cold. And Bella heard it. Her cloudy eyes cleared, her head slowly lifted. It was as if a sound from a forgotten lifetime had found its way back home. What happened next would shake the heart of Sundance Creek and prove one thing. When medicine fails, sometimes healing comes from the places we thought were broken forever. Before we dive deeper, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And if this story touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Tomorrow's story might be the one you've been needing. The Montana winter had settled over Whispering Pines like a heavy blanket. Temperatures dropped to 20 below, snow sculpting ghostly shapes across the valley. Inside the heated recovery barn, Ruth stood beside Bella, her hand resting gently on the mare's weathered neck. Beneath her fingers, she could feel the sharp ridge of Bella's spine, a painful reminder of how fast the once powerful body had withered. "Still not eating?" asked Dr. Amanda Foster, walking in with her kit. Her eyes scanned the untouched hay and the special senior feed. Nothing had been touched. Ruth just shook her head. "Not a single bite since Saturday. That's 9 days now. She's sipping a little water, but that's it." Dr. Foster knelt beside the old mare, who still lay on her side, breathing slow but steady. The eyes that once earned her the nickname Bella's Flame were now dim, staring at something far beyond the barn walls. "We've ruled out colic. No infection, no dental issues," she murmured. "Blood work shows nothing. It's as if she's chosen." Ruth finished the sentence, her voice cracking. For 30 years, Ruth had cared for horses here, but none like Bella. Bella wasn't just any horse. She arrived nearly 3 decades ago, already a living legend. Captured at age 25 after evading roundups for years, she was supposed to be auctioned off, until Ruth and her late husband Harold stepped in. "She was never meant to be in captivity," Ruth whispered, running her fingers through Bella's faded silver mane. "Even after all this time, there's something in her that refuses to be tamed." Dr. Foster nodded. Bella had become more than just part of the ranch. She was living history, a direct line to America's wild Mustang heritage. Kids came from schools to see her. Researchers studied her. Donors gave after meeting her. She was the soul of this place. And now it felt like that soul was slipping away. "We've done everything possible," said Dr. Foster, putting her stethoscope back in her bag. "But sometimes, animals that come from the wild, they know when it's time, and they choose." Ruth nodded, blinking back tears. The entire staff was heartbroken. Many had never known Whispering Pines without Bella. She had outlived her herd. She'd survived blizzards, droughts, even mountain lions. And now, it felt surreal to think she might just fade. Outside, the snow kept falling. The usual noise of the ranch was gone. Everyone moved in silence. Even the horses in nearby paddocks stood still, as if they sensed what was happening. Then Jack Wilson appeared in the barn doorway, snow dusting his hair. At 35, Jack represented the future of the ranch, young, passionate, and devoted to preserving wild horses. "Any change?" he asked, breath steaming in the cold air. Ruth shook her head. We're out of options, Jack. Maybe not all, he replied cautiously. I've been digging through Bella's history. There might be one more thing we haven't tried. Ruth turned to him. What do you mean? I found something in her original capture files. There was someone who had a unique bond with her, someone who might still be able to reach her. Who? She asked, the hope barely hiding in her voice. Jack took a breath. The silence that followed hung heavy, broken only by the labored rise and fall of Bella's breathing. Ruth's hand, worn and trembling, rested still on the mare's neck. Scott hasn't set foot on this ranch in 17 years, she said at last, her voice tight, eyes fixed on the floor. I know, Jack replied gently, but according to Bella's early rehab records, he was everything to her. It says he spent hours with her every single day for almost a year, that no one else could even approach her at first. He meant something to her, Ruth, something no one else did. Ruth turned away, shoulders stiff. The mention of her son's name opened wounds she'd spent nearly 2 decades trying to bury. Their last fight had been brutal, words thrown like weapons, ones you can't ever take back. After that, Scott had walked away, from the ranch, from his family, from the legacy his father built with bare hands. Ruth, Dr. Foster spoke softly. I know it's complicated, but we're out of time, if there's even a chance. He wouldn't come, Ruth cut in, her voice hollow. Even if I asked him, and honestly, I don't know if I can. Jack hesitated. Then, choosing his words carefully, he said, I found his number. He's living in Clearwater Valley now, 4 hours out, give or take. I took the liberty of looking him up. Ruth turned sharply. You what? I overstepped, Jack admitted without flinching. Yes, ma'am, but Bella's dying. And I don't think you want to spend the rest of your life wondering if you could have done more. The barn went quiet again, save for the wind pressing against the walls and Bella's ragged breaths. Ruth imagined making that call, hearing her son's voice after all this time, swallowing the pride she'd carried like armor for nearly 2 decades. Her stomach churned at the thought. Dr. Foster checked her watch. I've got rounds back at the clinic. I'll be back tonight. We'll keep the IV going, but it's just buying hours now, not days. She touched Ruth's shoulder. Please, think about it. When she left, Ruth remained beside Bella, trapped in a storm of memory. Harold would have known what to do. He always did. He was the bridge between her and Scott, the calm when their stubbornness clashed like thunder. But Harold had been gone for 5 years now, and some aches don't ever fade. What would you do, old man? She whispered, brushing Bella's mane. She's as stubborn as I am. Maybe that's why we've always understood each other. Outside, the snow fell harder. The wind howled louder. Day slipped into night. Ruth dozed in a chair beside the stall, waking every hour to check on Bella. Around midnight, Jack returned with a thermos of coffee and a sandwich she couldn't bring herself to eat. Any change? He asked, even though he could see the answer in the mare's fading posture. Ruth just shook her head. You should go home, Jack. Get some rest. Instead, he sat down quietly on a nearby hay bale. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. His presence said enough. Finally, as the first threads of dawn crept through the barn's frost-covered windows, Ruth made her decision. I'll need his number, she said, the words tasting like gravel. Jack handed her his phone. It was already pulled up. Ruth's hand shook slightly as she took it. 17 years of silence sat between her and the number on the screen. What could she even say? How do you distill a lifetime of pain and regret into one moment that might bring her son home? She hit call before she could talk herself out of it. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a click, and a voice that slammed her heart back through time. Hello? Ruth closed her eyes. Scott, it's your mother. The pause on the other end stretched forever. Mom? His voice sounded surprised, tired, guarded. What's going on? Is it? It's Bella, she said, and the name cracked something inside her. She's dying, Scott. She stopped eating. Nothing's working. I wouldn't have called if... What do the vets say? He interrupted, his tone changing immediately, urgency in every syllable. She heard movement in the background like he was already grabbing keys. They've done everything, Ruth said, her voice faltering. She's been refusing food for over 9 days. Dr. Foster says it's just a matter of time now. Silence again. Only his breathing came through. You think I can help? He asked, and there was more to the question than just Bella. Jack found your name in her rehab notes, Ruth said quietly. Apparently, you had a bond with her, something no one else had. I'm asking for your help, Scott. Please. Another long pause. Is Sophia coming with you too? She asked gently, almost afraid of the answer. Your granddaughter? He said, surprised. Ruth blinked, stunned. I didn't know. You had a daughter. 16 years old now. You've never met her, he said softly, the weight of those words sinking into Ruth like ice water. Before she could respond, he continued. We'll come. Give me 6 hours. The roads are bad, Ruth warned. The storm. I'll be careful. He paused. Mom, is it really that bad? Ruth looked over at Bella, her once strong body hollow, her breathing thin and slow. Yes, she whispered. It's that bad. Bella's once glowing coat now rippled weakly under Ruth's touch, dull and lifeless, where it used to shine like silver under the sun. Yes, Ruth whispered into the phone. It's really bad. Keep her going. I'll be there as soon as I can. The line went dead. Ruth handed the phone back to Jack, who'd been pretending not to eavesdrop. His face stayed neutral, but she could see it, the flicker of hope in his eyes. He's coming, she said quietly, the words tasting strange on her tongue. And he's bringing his daughter, my granddaughter. Jack gave a single resolute nod. I'll prep the guest rooms, and I'll call Amanda. Tell her to return as soon as possible. Left alone again with Bella, Ruth sank into the old wooden chair beside the stall. Emotions churned in her chest like a storm. After 17 years, her son was coming home. Not for her, but for a horse. A bitter kind of irony. She leaned close to Bella's ear, her voice soft but urgent. Did you hear that, old girl? Scott's coming. You just have to hold on a little longer. Maybe it was just her imagination, or maybe it was something more. But Ruth could have sworn she saw Bella's ear flick at the sound of his name. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and endless, laying a clean white blanket over Whispering Pines Ranch. And inside the barn, an old woman waited, not just for her son, but for a chance to mend something far more fragile than Bella's life, something that had been broken for far too long. The 6-hour wait was agony. Ruth paced the barn aisle. She sat by Bella. She stared down the snowy driveway, heart racing at every sound. Mid-morning, Dr. Foster returned, checking Bella's IV and administering another dose of nutrients. But her eyes said what her words only confirmed. She's fading, Ruth. Her system's shutting down. The IV's keeping her stable. But just barely. Ruth straightened, her voice suddenly fierce. My son is coming. He'll be here soon. Dr. Foster placed a hand gently on Ruth's arm. I hope he can help. Truly. Hours passed. Ruth drifted in and out of memory. She saw herself and Harold leading a terrified wild mare off a trailer, coaxing her out with patience and soft words. She remembered Scott, 28 at the time, sitting in Bella's stall for hours, his quiet presence soothing the traumatized Mustang. Where had that gentle, empathetic boy gone? When had the rift between them truly begun? The answers were unclear, but now, staring down the possibility of never seeing him again, Ruth realized maybe she hadn't been as blameless as she'd once believed. Shortly after noon, Jack burst into the barn, snow clinging to his coat. There's a vehicle coming up the drive, slow but definitely headed this way. Ruth's heart leapt. She smoothed her hair with shaking fingers, suddenly aware of her flannel shirt, her weathered jeans, the deep lines on her face. The years had left their mark. Ruth, Jack said gently, reading the worry in her eyes. Focus on Bella. Everything else can wait." She nodded, grateful for his calm presence as the low hum of an engine grew louder, then stopped. Car doors slammed. The crunch of boots on snow grew closer. Ruth moved to Bella's side, placing her hand on the mare's neck, grounding herself. She needed Bella to feel her strength, even as her own courage wavered. Then the barn door creaked open, and there he was. Scott Johnson, the pale winter sun behind him, cast his frame in silhouette. For a moment, Ruth forgot how to breathe. She saw the stranger he'd become, and the boy she'd once raised. Behind him, half-shadowed, stood a teenage girl, uncertain, guarded, her posture mirroring his. After 17 years of silence, her son had come home, and Ruth had no idea what to say. Preparing and telling this story takes a lot of heart and time. If it's moving you even half as much as it moved us creating it, consider subscribing. It means the world. Now let's return to the moment that changed everything. For one breathless heartbeat, they just stared. Mother and son. The barn held its breath with them. Scott had aged. The soft edges of youth had sharpened into fine lines. Silver streaked the temples of his once dark hair. But his eyes, that piercing blue, remained the same. The same eyes that had always reminded her of Harold. "Mom," he said finally, his voice rough, thick with emotion he clearly wasn't ready to let spill. "You made good time," Ruth replied, grasping for something, anything, normal to say. "Interstate was fine till Sundance Creek. Local roads were a mess." He stomped the snow from his boots, stepping fully into the barn. The girl behind him lingered in the doorway, half hidden, watching Ruth with quiet curiosity. Scott gently placed a hand on Ruth's shoulder. "This is Sophia," he said. "Sophia, this is your grandmother." Ruth's heart clenched. The girl was beautiful, tall, graceful. A cascade of dark hair escaped her knitted hat. And her eyes, those same blue eyes, looked straight into Ruth's. 17 years of missed birthdays, milestones, and memories hit Ruth like a wave. "Hello," Sophia said. Her voice was soft but confident. "Hello, Sophia," Ruth replied, her voice catching. "I'm very glad to meet you." An awkward silence filled the space between them, but in that quiet, there was also something else, something beginning to mend. The moment Scott turned his attention to the stall, the weight of everything else seemed to fall away. "How is she?" he asked, moving past Ruth with quiet purpose. His gaze locked on Bella. "Holding on," Ruth replied, her voice low, but barely. "Amanda, Dr. Foster says her organs are starting to shut down." Scott approached slowly, his movements measured. His eyes, though softened by years away, were still the eyes of someone who understood horses. Ruth had assumed that part of him had disappeared when he left the ranch behind, but she was wrong. "Is she responding to anyone?" he asked, his voice shifting into something gentler. "Minimal," Ruth said. "She acknowledges Jack sometimes, me occasionally, but she's slipping further away every day." Scott unzipped his coat but left it on, then paused at the stall door. "May I?" he asked. Ruth stepped aside with a nod. He entered slowly, not approaching Bella directly, but crouching in the straw a few feet from her head. He didn't try to touch her, he just sat, quiet, present. "Hey there, old girl," he said softly. "Remember me?" The reaction was instant. Bella's ear, which hadn't moved all morning, flicked forward. Her nostrils trembled. "That's it," Scott continued, keeping his tone low and soothing. "It's been a long time, huh? I've missed you." Her eyes, clouded and distant just moments ago, shifted, focusing on him. Ruth felt her breath catch. She turned to Jack, who was watching in open awe. "Keep talking," Ruth whispered, barely above a breath, not wanting to break whatever this was. Scott didn't respond. His attention was fully on Bella. "You're not looking your best," he murmured with a soft smile. "But you've seen worse, haven't you? Remember that first winter? Everyone thought you wouldn't make it then either, but you proved them wrong." Bella's breathing changed, just a little, less strained. Scott leaned in slightly, still keeping his distance. Then, He began to hum, a low, distinct melody, almost like a lullaby, and Bella responded. She lifted her head, just a few inches off the straw, but it was the first time Ruth had seen her move voluntarily in days. Her eyes locked onto Scott's. "What's that tune?" Ruth asked, unable to hide her curiosity. "Just something I used to hum to her," Scott replied, still focused on Bella. "She always calmed down when she heard it." Before Ruth could say more, Dr. Foster stepped into the barn and paused, surprised to see a stranger crouched by the stall. "You must be the son," she said, her voice more curious than formal. Scott gave a brief nod, but didn't shift his focus. "Has she taken any water today?" "Very little," Dr. Foster said, stepping closer. "We're keeping her hydrated with IV." "Can I try, by hand?" Scott asked. Dr. Foster glanced at Ruth, who nodded. "It can't hurt." Jack moved quickly, returning with a small bucket of fresh water. Scott took it and resumed humming, letting the rhythm guide him as he slowly brought the bucket into Bella's view. "Come on, beautiful," he whispered. "Just a little sip." For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, with painful slowness, Bella extended her muzzle. She reached the bucket, took a sip, then another. "That's it," Scott murmured, emotion thick in his voice. "Good girl, Doctor." Foster's eyes widened. "That's the first time she's taken water on her own in almost 2 days." "How are you doing this?" she asked softly. But Scott said nothing, just kept encouraging Bella, whispering between the melody until the mare finally pulled back, having drunk more than she had in a week. "We understood each other," Scott said simply. "Back then, I spent months earning her trust." "Would you try feeding her?" Dr. Foster asked quickly, signaling Jack to bring a small portion of the senior feed Bella had refused all week. Scott nodded. The process repeated. The soft humming, the gentle voice, the slow offering of food from the palm of his hand. Ruth held her breath. Bella sniffed it, then slowly, deliberately, took a small mouthful. "Oh my God," Ruth whispered. "Doctor," Foster was already scribbling notes, checking the time. "This is remarkable. Neurologically speaking, this is auditory stimulation paired with scent-based memory." "It's not science," Sophia said, speaking up for the first time since stepping into the barn. "She remembers him." Dr. Foster smiled. "You're right. Sometimes the bond between a human and an animal goes beyond anything we can measure." And for the next hour, that's exactly what Scott did. No medicine, no machines, just presence, patience, and a tune from another life. Scott spent the evening doing what no vet or treatment had managed so far, reconnecting with Bella. He talked to her in low tones, offered small sips of water, fed her in careful handfuls, and revived the bond they had built so many years ago. The progress was subtle, but undeniable. By nightfall, Bella had consumed more food and water than she had in the past 9 days combined. "This doesn't mean she's out of danger," Dr. Foster warned gently, lingering long past her scheduled visit. "She's still very, very ill, but it's a good sign, the best one we've seen." "I'll stay with her tonight," Scott said, his tone leaving no room for debate. "There's a cot in the tack room," Ruth offered, her voice awkward, unsure how to navigate this new version of her son, who now moved with quiet authority in the space she once ruled. "You'll both need dinner," she added, almost as an afterthought. "I've got stew warming in the house." Scott hesitated, glancing back at Bella. "I can sit with her," Jack offered. "At least while you get your daughter settled and have something to eat. I'll call you if anything changes." Scott gave him a grateful nod. "Thanks. I won't be long." He turned to Ruth, pausing at the threshold of an unspoken question. "Is my old room still?" Ruth swallowed hard. She remembered the day he left, storming into his room in grief and rage, packing everything into boxes she couldn't bring herself to throw away. They'd ended up in the attic. "It's been made up for guests," she said quietly. "It's ready." The walk to the house was silent. Their boots crunched on fresh snow, the sound sharp in the stillness. Sophia stayed close to her father, eyes scanning the ranch buildings, the distant paddocks, and the towering mountains that surrounded them. "It's beautiful here," she said at last as they approached the house, a sturdy, weathered log home that had belonged to the Johnsons for 3 generations. "It is," Ruth agreed, surprised by the girl's sudden warmth, especially after a new snow. Inside, the warmth of the kitchen embraced them. The scent of beef stew filled the air, comforting and familiar. But as Ruth stood among the old oak cabinets and hand-thrown pottery mugs, she felt strangely out of place, as if the past and present were colliding in a way she couldn't fully make sense of. "The bathroom's down the hall if you'd like to wash up," she said, falling back on routine to mask the emotional weight pressing on her. "I'll serve dinner." As Sophia disappeared down the hallway, Scott lingered in the kitchen, his eyes taking in the room that had barely changed. The same worn table, the same copper-bottomed pots, the same collection of mugs he remembered wrapping his hands around as a child. "You kept it the same," he said softly. Ruth busied herself with the stew, avoiding his gaze. "No reason to change what works." Scott ran his hand over the back of one of the chairs, a small gesture, but one that hit Ruth square in the chest. It was the same chair he used to sit in every night. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here," he admitted. "After Dad died, I thought maybe you'd sell the place." Ruth set the bowls down with a little more force than necessary. "This is my home, Bella's home, not something you just walk away from when it gets inconvenient." The words landed hard. Scott's expression shifted, hurt flickering beneath the surface. "That's not fair, isn't it?" she asked. Before either of them could say more, Sophia returned, sensing the tension like static in the room. She sat down quietly and broke the silence. "Do you think Bella's going to be okay now?" Ruth grabbed the lifeline. "It's too soon to say," she said, taking her seat. "But your father seems to have gotten through to her in a way no one else could." Scott's posture softened as he joined them. "Bella's a fighter," he said. "She always has been. But she's old, especially for a horse who spent so many years wild." Ruth placed steaming bowls of stew in front of them and set a loaf of homemade bread on the table. Feeding people, even these people, gave her something solid to hold on to. "How did you learn to do that?" she asked, settling in. "That connection, the humming." Scott tore a piece of bread, thoughtful. "It just happened. When she first came, she was terrified. I'd sit in her paddock for hours just being near her. The humming came because the silence felt too heavy. It wasn't a technique, it was just something between us." "But she remembered," Sophia said, eyes wide, "even after all this time." "Horses have incredible memories," Scott said, "especially when something is tied to emotion. Bella and I went through a lot together. She was adjusting to life in captivity, even if it was kind captivity." He hesitated, glancing at Ruth. "And I was going through some things, too." The history between them hung in the air, unspoken, unresolved. His disillusionment with ranch life, his dreams of something else, their fights about responsibility and legacy. How a simple difference in vision had turned into 17 years of silence. Sophia looked at Ruth, her voice softer now. "Dad never told me much about the ranch." Scott had only told Sophia that the ranch wasn't the life for him, but Ruth pushed down old defensiveness and admitted something new, that her husband, though a rancher for 40 years, had truly loved woodworking. Scott was visibly surprised. Ruth had never acknowledged that before. "There are a lot of things I never said," she admitted. When Scott checked his watch, saying he needed to get back to the barn, Sophia asked if she could come. Though hesitant, he agreed after she insisted, wanting to learn and be part of Bella's story. Ruth observed the bond between father and daughter, their natural affection and mutual understanding, and felt something bittersweet rise within her. Scott had clearly raised a kind and strong young woman. As they headed back, Ruth impulsively said, "I'm glad you came." Scott replied carefully, "I didn't come for us, Mom. I came for Bella." Ruth nodded. "I know, but I'm still glad." The barn was quiet when they returned. Jack reported Bella had taken more water. Scott resumed his watch, humming softly to the mare, and Sophia asked if she could sit inside the stall too. Ruth noted her granddaughter's sincere interest, something that couldn't be taught. When Sophia asked Scott to tell the story of meeting Bella, He recalled the mare's fear after being captured and how simply sitting near her, humming, helped build trust. Ruth realized she had missed how deeply Scott had connected with Bella. Scott admitted he was angry back then, expected to run the ranch while his father was getting sick, and he felt trapped. Bella gave him a place to channel those feelings. When Sophia asked if that's when the humming began, Scott smiled. It had started unconsciously, but it became their shared language. Ruth, hearing the story unfold, finally told Scott he hadn't been wrong about everything. The ranch had been in trouble. After he left, she'd had to modernize it with Jack's help. This was the honest conversation they'd never had. No blame, just truths. Scott apologized for not coming back when Harold died. Ruth admitted she should have called. Their mutual regrets filled the space between them, not as accusations, but fragile steps toward healing. Then Bella made a soft sound, the first in days. Scott responded immediately, and the mare made a greater effort to rise. Though unsuccessful, it showed determination. Ruth was emotional. Bella's will had returned. Scott whispered, she just needed to know she wasn't alone, and those words meant more than just about the horse. As dawn approached and they sat in silence, Ruth asked the question that had haunted her for years. When did Scott know he wanted to leave? He explained it wasn't a single moment, but a growing realization, watching his father sacrifice dreams just to survive each season. He saw a future with no turns and panicked. Ruth reflected. They had seen the ranch as freedom, not a trap. But now, for the first time, she understood his dream. Scott revealed he had become an architect, started his own firm, and designed sustainable homes. Ruth, emotional, said simply, "You did it. You found your path." But Scott, looking at Bella, admitted he lost things too, things that mattered. Ruth then confessed. After Harold died, she hired a private investigator and even drove to Seattle, but never went in to see Scott. "Too much pride," she said. Scott admitted he might have slammed the door back then. Both had let stubbornness win. Then Bella tried to stand. Though she didn't fully succeed, the effort was unmistakable. She wasn't giving up. "She's getting stronger," Scott said. "She's remembering she's not alone." Ruth looked at her son and knew. This was more than Bella's fight. It was theirs too.